Okay friends, one of the first things we have to do to get started on our job is to come right underneath the driver's side of the truck. You're going to find your emergency brake cables. This area right here is your adjuster, and we want to de-adjust that so it has no pressure leading down to your brakes. We're just going to de-adjust this. All right, at this point I de-adjusted this so I have a lot of slack. My cable's hanging down. I know it's putting no pressure on my rear brakes. I also made sure that I had a little bit of adjustment on both sides of this right here. You want to make sure once you go ahead and adjust up the rear brakes, when we're done with this, we can come here and we can make our fine-tuning adjustments with this area right here. At this point, you're going to want to make sure that you have the rear of your vehicle raised and supported so we can spin the wheels. Once you're sure both the wheels can spin freely, let's continue on to removing all of our lug nuts and then the wheel. Obviously, replacing the emergency brake shoes, you're going to do these as a pair. What I mean by that is you're going to do the driver's side and the passenger side. Typically, you want to be able to do this at the same exact time. So go ahead and take off the wheel on the other side. Then we're going to start taking apart the brakes right here. We'll get in there, start replacing everything, do the same on the other side before we continue on with any adjustments. The wheel off of here, you have a nice clear view of your rear caliper. We're going to want to take off the ABS wire from the flex hose here. You're just going to find some little black clips. If you carefully do that, you can remove it. We just want to make sure that we have plenty of slack so we're not going to put any tug on our ABS wire while we remove our caliper. The next thing we'll do is gently push in our caliper a tiny bit just so it releases from the rotor completely, and then we'll remove both of our mounting bolts that hold the caliper bracket to the rear differential. Just going to leave that in there a couple threads. Carefully remove your caliper. Go ahead and take a peek at those brake pads. You want to make sure that those are in good condition as well. If it looks like they're at approximately 230 seconds, it's a great time to go ahead and replace them. Let's set this aside so it's putting no pressure on our flex hose and it won't damage anything. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and grab onto the rotor. We're going to give it a little twist and try to remove it. If it feels like the rotor's stuck on there, you're going to want to come through the access port on the back side of the backing plate and just carefully de-adjust it so you can remove the rotors. Before we go ahead and take off the shoes, just pay attention to the way that the hardware is. Looking in here, you can see where your star adjuster is. You want to make sure that you have that facing in the same direction when you go ahead and put everything back together. The way that it needs to be is so that it lines up with your adjustment port right here. If you put it on the wrong side, it's going to be difficult to adjust. And when you do adjust it, you're going to be going in the opposite direction than what you want to. The first thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and slide this right inside here, and I want to find something to pry on without damaging anything. Essentially, I just want to kind of grab onto that shoe, and I'm going to gently pry and try to separate the two shoes. While I do that, I can start removing the star adjuster in here. Should fall out of the way. Slide that out of there, easy peasy. Now we're going to remove this spring right here. Just go ahead and press the shoe in, that should pretty much release it. Get that out of there. Now we're going to move along to removing our anchor pins. These are the pins that come through from the back side of the backing plate out through the forward side right here. And then there's going to be these little clips right there that slide right over it. For these right here, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to press this up. That unlocked that pin. Let's do the same on the other side. Now these are nice and free. The next thing that we want to do is gently pry the shoe away from this area here, and then we'll do the same on the other side, and we should be able to slide this out. Just going to rotate these shoes. Set these aside. With the shoes out of the way, we can remove our anchor pins. Now that we have everything taken apart, the next thing that we're going to want to do in this area is clean everything down. We want to make sure that we don't have any debris sitting around up on top of the axle area here. You want to make sure that the ABS sensor is clean and free of any debris as well. And any other rust flakes that you might see that's inside this area, make sure it's all out of there. I'm going to use some parts cleaner. Just be very careful because it could potentially make dust or even parts cleaner get up in the air and into your face. The next thing that we're going to pay attention to is this area right along here. This is your e-brake actuator. If you were to go ahead and pull on that e-brake, you should be able to see this move just like that. If it doesn't move, you need to go ahead and make sure you free it up. But assuming it does, now let's go ahead and put a little bit of lubricant in there to make sure that it keeps working the way that it should. Continuing with our cleaning, let's make sure that we clean up the hub area of the axle where the rotor is going to sit. Just use a little brush like that. Get off any debris. Also clean up the mating surface on the back side of your rotor where that axle is going to sit. Pay attention to this area right along here where the emergency brake shoes are going to ride. If it looks like it has a lot of buildup or rust flakes on it, go ahead and take some sandpaper and just smooth it out. Now we need to add a little bit of lubricant to the backing plate here where the shoes are going to ride. You're going to see that you have some dimpled areas that kind of bump out a little bit. You want to make sure you apply just a teeny bit of lubricant on that. That's going to help with friction from the brake shoes moving around on this. You have the area where your e-brake actuator is going to sit right up against that backing plate. I like to put a little bit right in between there and then down along this area here on both sides where the shoe is going to sit. Something else that you're going to want to clean if you're not replacing your emergency brake hardware would be your star adjuster right here. You want to make sure that everything comes apart nice and easy and it flows as it should. Just go ahead and clean up all the threaded area there and then add a little bit of lubricant and put it all back together. Now it's going to be time to start installing our brand new emergency brake shoes. Just take a look at them. You're going to notice on one side you're going to have this little double curved out area, and on the other side, which is the side that the adjuster is going to go on, it's just pretty much a flat carve out right there. So we want to have the double areas down along the bottom. We want to make sure that they match up just like that. Now we're going to take our springs and we'll start them on there along the bottom. Now we're going to start putting in the shoes. We're going to take our inboard spring. You can see that I have the longer side right along here. I'm going to put that right in along the back shoe. Essentially, the reason why that is because we have this area right here, which is on the e-brake actuator. We want to make sure that the spring isn't hitting up against it, and obviously if I had it this way, the spring's going to definitely hit. Slide it in just like that. Now we can put it in over this. We'll start it in. Okay. As you can tell, it's very clear from the actuator. Now we're going to take our mounting hardware. We'll just take one of the pins. We're going to come right through that backing plate hole and then through the hole in the shoe. Now we can take our little clip. You can see on that pin it has kind of like a flat blade on it. You want to make sure that that flat blade lines up with the area on the clip, and then we're going to go ahead and turn that to lock it in. There we are. I'm just trying to carefully pry on this to squeeze it in. Once it's through the slot, I'll go ahead and give it a little spin. Now, once you have it set in there, you want to pay special attention to the blade of the pin itself and the slot of the clip. You want to make sure that it's sitting completely at a 90-degree angle right there. You can tell that it's completely locked in. We'll just give it a little wiggle around, make sure it's secured. I've got the spring started on the forward shoe. Now I'm just going to carefully pry on this a little bit. Try to slide it into position. There we are. Now you want to inspect this area along here where your actuator is. Make sure it's sitting into the groove right there. You also want to make sure you check the bottom area of these shoes and make sure they're sitting into their corresponding grooves as well. Let's get this forward spring in. Slide that right in there. I'm just going to carefully grab onto this spring. I'll use some long nose pliers like this. That way there I can use a little bit of leverage prying up against the axle. Just carefully try to get that into the corresponding hole. Make sure it's completely situated inside the hole. Let's continue on to our upper spring. It doesn't really matter which direction you put this in. As you can tell, it's the same on either side. We want to try to get this into the corresponding holes up along the top of the shoe. Start with this one. Do the same for this one. Okay. Once you have the spring started on both sides, we're going to gently try to pry up against this, just like that, to separate the two shoes, and then we can put in our adjuster. Remember when we removed the original one? We didn't have it facing in this direction. We had the star wheel facing towards the front on the driver's side. Be very careful not to get your fingers into any pinch points where you might potentially get hurt. Now I'm just going to gently pry up and down on this just to make sure that it's completely seated in where it needs to be. You want to make sure that that does not fall out. Let's go ahead and put in our anchor pin on this side and do the same as we did on the rearward shoe. If you want to, you can carefully try to pull these shoes apart so you can squeeze this in there. Just going to put it down like that. All right, we've got that turned. We want to make sure that it's completely secured just like we did the other side. Let's apply some copper never sees along the mating surface of the axle. The next thing that we're going to do is continue on by adjusting up the emergency brake. Now commonly, people would like to use their lug nut and they'll just kind of put a couple of them on there to hold the rotor up against the axle. If you do that with these lug nuts, you're going to potentially damage them. So all I'm going to do is just go ahead and hold the rotor up against the axle as firm as possible. And essentially I want to be able to spin this like this while I try to adjust it. Once I start feeling a teeny bit of drag on this right here, I'll just turn it back 1 or 2 turns, and then we should be good to go. And then we'll do the same process on the other side of the truck. All right, so I adjusted this, and as you can probably hear, I have quite a bit of drag right here. You definitely don't want to leave it with this much drag because any of that's going to cause friction, which causes heat. Heat's going to make the metal expand, and you might find that you have hanging up e-brake shoes. So I'm just going to go ahead and de-adjust this a little bit at this point so we have no more drag. Okay, now at this point, the shoes are just barely touching up against that. This feels great. Along the backside, we're just going to go ahead and test this emergency brake. Let's use a little bit of leverage. I'm going to come in between these points. I'm going to press right up against that e-brake lever. Essentially what we're paying attention to is just how far this moves. It goes approximately half the way of the throw, so I feel confident that that feels good. If I could take this and I could go all the way like that and it just didn't feel like it wanted to stop the brakes at all, I'm too far de-adjusted. If I do this and I try to pry and it barely wants to move at all, more than likely I'm going to have an extreme amount of drag right here, and that means I'm too far over adjusted. You just want to have approximately right in the middle there. That feels great. Take your caliper, slide it right over the rotor here. We'll get everything lined up. We're going to use our caliper bracket bolts. Make sure you use a little bit of red thread locker. We'll snug these up and then we'll torque them to manufacturer specifications. Let's torque these to 142 foot-pounds. Let's reattach our ABS wire. Make sure it's completely secured. If it's not clipped in, it could potentially get damaged on your wheel as you're driving. Let's put this in here. Once you have the other side adjusted, you want to just come back over to the driver's side. You just want to give it a little spin to make sure it still spins freely. After that, let's go ahead and put our wheels up on here. We'll snug them up. We'll finish our last adjustment for the emergency brake, get the wheel on the ground, and torque it to manufacturer specifications. Obviously, we can't leave the emergency brake cable hanging like this. We want to make sure that we have it so it's at least semi-taut and trying to stay up there. That's also going to help ensure that the emergency brake will function as it should. When I hold this up here, if I tightened it to the point that the brakes would be good, you can see right where that adjustment nut is. That's approximately where we need to adjust it to. All right, I've got this so it's sitting up and a little bit taut. Let's give it a little bit extra here. Okay. Now the next thing we want to do is go to those rear wheels. We're going to try to give them a little spin. We want to make sure that they still spin free and clear. They're not dragging or hung up by this emergency brake cable being over tightened. Okay, that feels good. Now we can try the emergency brake. Go ahead and pump up the brakes. Make sure the calipers are completely pumped up. All right, that feels nice and firm. Now I'm going to continue on to applying my emergency brake approximately halfway. We'll put this in reverse and see if it rolls. I got nothing. Let's go forward. I got a little bit of a roll there. So now at this point, what I found was that when I put this truck in reverse, the e-brake seemed like it held perfectly. I went ahead and put it in drive. It seems as though the truck wanted to kind of slightly roll forward without even having any pressure on it, like I was trying to mildly accelerate it all, or if I was sitting on a hill of some sort. So what I need to do is go ahead and jack up the rear a little bit again. We're going to just kind of finely tune those emergency brakes by using the center cable right here and just try to see if we can get it to hold. We'll go ahead and try this again, make sure it holds perfectly. Okay, I adjusted it up again. Got our e-brake approximately halfway, 3/4 here. Holds pretty good forward. Not bad. Release it. Whoa. Drive. I think we're good to go. Once you're sure everything functions properly, the next thing that we're going to do is torque all of our lug nuts. Torque these to 135 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Do the same to the other side of the truck. Okay friends, we got the truck all back together. What's left to do now? Now you're going to safely take your truck for a road test. You want to make sure as you're driving it for an extended period of time, you don't start to feel the chattering coming from the rear of your truck. If it starts to chatter a little bit and you happen to get out and it seems like one side's very hot and the other side isn't hot at all, well, that kind of means maybe you over-adjusted something a little bit. You could have potentially caused some damage, so it really makes sense to just go ahead and take it back apart and double check it if that's the case. But overall, if you adjusted it properly so it holds at approximately 3/4 of the way down on that emergency brake pedal, you should be good to go.